Chi Minh que golpea de Vietnam a toda la humanidad. Ningún cañón borrará el surco de tu arrozal, el derecho de vivir en paz. Del ancho mar, donde revientan la flor, con genocidio y napalm, la luna es una explosión que funde todo el clamor, el derecho de vivir en paz. Indochina es el lugar más allá del ancho mar, donde revientan la flor con genocidio y napalm. La luna es una explosión que funde todo el clamor, el derecho de vivir en paz.
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. We are New York City Democratic Socialists of America, and this is our mass call. New York City says no war with Iran. Thank you all for being here tonight. We want to keep this tight to an hour. Really appreciate everyone making the time to stand in solidarity this evening and oppose US and Israeli aggression on Iran and on the broader region. My name is Huda. I am the membership coordinator for New York City DSA, and I will moderate our call tonight. And I will kick things off by passing them on to our co-chair, Grace. Grace, take it away.
Thank you, Hoda. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Mauser. I'm one of the co-chairs of New York City DSA. And when I heard about the strikes that happened in Iran, and honestly, when I've heard about the wars happening, that Trump is escalating everywhere, I feel despair and powerlessness in a way that I rarely experience anymore as a leftist. I think this is because foreign policy power seems continually out of reach for leftists, and it remains an area where we are possibly the least organized and the least powerful. But everyone here is a participant in the largest socialist movement the US has seen in a century. DSA has 14,000 members in New York City and over 100,000 nationally, and countless more fellow travelers. This means that we have a responsibility to organize at home and to pressure those in power, and ultimately change those in power, to enact socialism here and to end imperialism abroad. But we know that these two goals are deeply related. Foreign wars are used by fascists to consolidate power at home. And make no mistake, Trump is doing exactly this, and our job as socialists is to fight it. Right now, congressional leadership, including and especially Democrats, are not willing to stand up to our fascist president. Even as he drags us into war after war and tramples on congressional authority, they are still cowards. But we know that all hope is not lost. With some Republicans opposed to the war, I think there's a real chance that at least one house passes the War Powers Resolution, and it's our job to help keep that pressure up. We are, as part of this call, encouraging everyone to send letters to their congressional representatives to do exactly that. But as socialists, we also won't stop at merely pressuring Congress. We are committed to changing Congress and all the halls of power. We have to elect leaders who know war will not liberate Iran or any people anywhere. Violence merely begets violence, and our bombs and our troops will deepen suffering, strengthening the forces of reaction, and shrink the space for resistance in Iran. To me, the most meaningful solidarity the US left can offer the Iranian people and people under siege everywhere is to stop this war and confront the authoritarian project driving it. We have to show our solidarity by using every tool available to restrain Trump and his power to wage war and defeat the political forces that for decades have been making endless wars possible. It's our duty to fight imperial aggression, to stand with people resisting repression everywhere, and to help build a future that is truly grounded in peace for Iran and for ourselves. The best way to do that, to join in on that vision and to fight, is to become organized. So if you aren't already, please join DSA. Please send a letter to your congressional representatives. And also, please power people who will actually challenge the authoritarian forces driving endless wars out of Congress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. The US-Israeli war on Iran did not come out of a vacuum. And as the organized socialist left in the United States, we need historical grounding and a shared understanding of the stakes that we face at this moment. Our goal is to defeat the war machine and save the lives of millions of people in Iran and all over the broader region. And tonight we begin with two speakers who have deep ties to Iran. Our first speaker is Nima Tutkabani. Nima is a former student activist from Iran. He was one of the organizers of a socialist student organization in Tehran in the 2000s. That organization was called Students for Equality and Freedom. His activism led to his arrest and his exile. He's currently based in New York City and has a background in sociology, and he has conducted research on the Iranian Revolution. Nima, thank you so much for being here. Over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. It's an honor for me to be here. Um, I think I want to talk a little bit about the background, the history of confrontation between the United States and Iran and Israel. But just in the interest of time, I think I'm just going to mention the turning points, the older, basically turning points, which I assume that many people are familiar with, and focus on the more recent developments. I think, as most of you know, the main or the first confrontation between the United States as an imperial state and Iran started in 1953, when the administration of Eisenhower illegally and forcefully brought down the democratically elected government of Iran and the Prime Minister Mossadegh, and replaced him with a monarch, the Shah, which ruled the country for 25 years, and it was basically a US puppet. As a result of that coup, and obviously many, many other factors, in 1979, there was a revolution, and in which many, many different actually political actors participated. The left was probably, at least at the beginning of the revolution, the strongest one, but there were also the Islamists and the nationalists and others. But then in the aftermath of the revolution, the Islamists took over and consolidated their power and formed the government that is still to this day in power, Islamic Republic of Iran. In the early days after the revolution, the Iranian revolutionaries were very skeptical about the US and US role and US intentions, and I think rightfully so, given the background. But in a kind of a strange turn of events, they took over the US embassy in November 1979, which led to the hostage crisis, which again, I'm just going to skip and not go to the details because I assume that many people are familiar with this. And then after the hostage crisis, Iran got into a war, an 8-year-long war with Iraq under Saddam Hussein. And I think almost all the historians and commentators agree that that war was kind of supported, or Saddam Hussein was basically somehow encouraged by both many other Gulf countries and also and the United States to attack Iran. Um, at the end of the war, Iran is trying to basically establish itself, the government of Islamic Republic, and reconstruct the country. It's been like 10 years of revolution and war. And as a part of their basically establishing themselves as the ruling government, they also think about normalizing their relationship with the United States. Although many of them, or most of them, were ideological and against the United States, but they also realized that living in today's world, it would be very difficult if you want to confront and antagonize the most powerful hegemon of the world. And there were a few moments, I would say, from 1988 to 1999 to the current time, or maybe I can say to 2018, when Iranians actually tried and reach out to the United States to somehow de-escalate and basically pave the way for some sort of renormalization. The first one actually happened right after the end of the war with Iraq in 1989. It was actually in the first George H.W. Bush administration. I'm going to skip that one because that's historically less important. The second and third one, I think, they're the ones that are more informative for our conversation. The second one was right after 9/11. There was a reformist government in Iran which really wanted to normalize relationship and get closer basically to the United States. And they condemned the 9/11 attacks, and they expressed their official message of condolences to the American people. And then after the United States attacked Afghanistan, they actually helped. And these are not a speculation, these are like very well established facts. And if anyone is interested, I can share the sources with them. The Iranian forces cooperated with the United States in Afghanistan to fight Taliban. And the reason was that Iranians were actually supporting and funding the anti-Taliban forces in Afghanistan for a very long time, and US actually needed Iranian intelligence to fight Taliban. And the idea, the understanding in the Iranian political elite was that this is a way for us to build some sort of trust with the United States. But what happened was after about 2 years, the United States decided to attack Iraq. And then President Bush, in that very famous speech, declared Iran, Iraq, and North Korea as members of the axis of evil. And that was the moment that actually Iranians realized that their optimism was a little bit naive, and they should not have actually trusted Americans. This is actually around the same time that Iranian nuclear program becomes like an issue on the world stage, and uh, rounds and rounds of negotiation, sanctions, and everything basically start from early 2000s. Um, in 2010s, to be more specific, in 2012, Iran was under heavy sanctions from the United States because of its nuclear program. And once again, they received some messages from the United States, and they actually basically responded to those messages positively, and they started negotiating again. Um, and they basically signed a deal which was called JCPOA, Joint Program, JCPOA. I can't remember actually what it's short for, but it's actually known for Iran deal. which actually limited the Iranian nuclear enrichment, but also at the same time relieved a lot of sanctions, lifted a lot of sanctions. And that deal was in place until 2018, when Donald Trump, with no reason and with no justification, came out of it and reimposed sanctions. And Iranians, I think, understandably, gradually also walked away from the commitments according to the deal. Trump thought that with pressuring Iran with sanctions, it would basically make them submit to his will or giving me a more favorable um, deal, which is actually what didn't happen. And he, as recently Steve Witkoff said, he was actually very frustrated and kind of baffled why Iranians actually do not give up to the pressure. Then there was in Trump's first administration, there was another round of confrontation when Trump killed a very high-ranking Iranian general, General Soleimani, which actually brought the U.S. and Iran very close to war. And then after he left office and came back, Iranians gave it again another try. And this was back in early days of Trump administration. He signaled that he wanted to work with Iran, and they started negotiating again. And negotiations were actually going on for some time, and it actually seemed like the negotiations were getting somewhere. But at some point, and obviously here just a speculation, but I think it's a valid speculation. As a result of the pressure from Israel and lobby of Israel, Trump actually changed his mind and decided to attack Iran in June of last year. And the idea was that they can attack Iran and they can take down the government, and that would be an easy thing to do because they thought that when they attack Iran, the Iranian people would rise up and overthrow the government. That didn't happen, and Iranians basically were able to withstand that attack. And after that, I think it was kind of known that that was a moment of crossing the Rubicon because they thought that after that attack, Iran had threatened before that it may change its nuclear doctrine and it will actually go and make a nuclear weapon. They thought, I think, in the thought of American administration and the Israeli government, they had to go back and finish the job. And they had tried many different things. Like in January, remember, there was a massive protest, which was caused by economic disruption. And Secretary of Treasury of the United States actually admitted openly that the U.S. was involved by blocking some of the Iranian money in the UAE. Basically, they created a shortage of dollar and an economic shock, which led to that turmoil. And then they were hopeful that in January they could actually use it as a justification to go and attack Iran, but the Iranian government suppressed the protests. And then after 2 months, they found themselves in the situation that they had to go and do it anyway. I just want to wrap up. This is obviously an ongoing war, and no one actually knows what's going to happen. But I think one thing that I want to highlight is that in the last 3, 4 days, one thing that has been clear is that this administration not only doesn't have any legal or moral justification for starting this war, it doesn't have any plan. And I think the reason that this is important is that they actually have entered the war, a long war without a plan, and they're going to have to continue and they're going to have to put more resources, then they're going to have to create more of a catastrophe in Iran, and they're going to have to get more and more American soldiers killed, which is, I think, the thing that we as socialists here, we should probably focus the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nima. I'm really honored to introduce our next speaker, who is a dear friend and comrade of mine for many years. Alexander Jabari is an associate professor of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Minnesota. He's joining us from Minneapolis tonight. Alexander, over to you.
Thank you, Huda. Hi, everyone. I think we all already know why it's so crucial to oppose this war, just as we've opposed other US wars of regime change. But this is even worse because I think the US and Israel's aim is not regime change, but regime collapse. They want to break the Iranian state and to turn Iran into something like Libya or Syria, a failed state that is too internally divided and dysfunctional to even be able to serve its people, let alone to create problems for American and Israeli interests in the region. So stopping this war is really an existential issue. Um, so there's two crucial things we on the left need to understand about Iran right now. One is that in the past years, the Islamic Republic's popular legitimacy has eroded for a number of reasons. And this has been especially true during and after the latest round of protests in January and February of this year, and the state's violent repression of protesters, which only deepened the state's legitimacy crisis. Of course, it absolutely still has supporters as well, but some of its traditional bases of support have really shrunk. And the second and related point is that these past years of state repression, but also the brutal sanctions regime imposed on Iran by the US that Nima spoke about, and the US-Israeli war on Iran last June, all of this has really taken a toll on Iranians, both at home and here in the US. Damaged is the word I've been using a lot to describe the Iranian community right now. Trauma is a word that gets thrown around maybe too easily or lightly these days, but I think it's really we're talking about communities of people who have been traumatized by all of this. Partly as a result of that, reactionary ideas and positions are very widespread. Obviously, like any group, Iranians are diverse. There's a range of different opinions, different kinds of politics, but right now, among many in Iran and in the Iranian American community, there is a lot of hostility to the left. And many in this community have embraced the far right. There's a lot of pro-Trump, pro-war, pro-Israel sentiment, a lot of open Islamophobia, a lot of nasty anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian racism. It's really ugly. I wouldn't excuse any of it, but it's a reality that we're going to need to grapple with if we want to build a mass base to stop this war. We need millions of people to come together to oppose the war. And to do that, we should keep the focus on why the war is bad for ordinary Americans. It's bad for Iran. It's bad for Iranians. We should avoid letting the anti-war position be seen as a referendum on how do people feel about the Iranian government. I think we all understand, and probably many or all of us share the desire to avoid demonizing Iran at a time when it's under this imperialist assault. We just have to tread carefully as we do so, or we risk alienating Iranians and others if we were to come across as taking a position really on the Islamic Republic. I think this has been a significant contradiction within the US anti-war movement over the past 25 years that I've been involved since the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003. This contradiction especially came to a head during a kind of weaker period of the anti-war left, during the US interventions in the 2010s in Libya and Syria, when a lot of diasporic communities who had suffered under these repressive regimes felt alienated from an anti-war movement that very rightly opposed US intervention, but we were perceived as being uncritical of those regimes that were targeted by US imperialism. And that turned off a lot of Syrians, Libyans, and others. So walking this fine line that opposes war, but does not take a position on the Islamic Republic, I think it's really important for principled reasons, but also just for strategic reasons. And so I'll conclude by saying that organizations like Cuban Americans for Cuba, or the DSA's own Cuban solidarity efforts, these are a really good model for us. These have been doing really admirable work in reaching out to Cuban Americans to involve them in the fight to end the US embargo on Cuba. And I think that they have done so by being sensitive to that community. People doing that kind of work understand that you're not going to have a lot of success organizing, Miami Cubans if you're wearing a t-shirt with Che Guevara on it. And I think we need to cultivate a similar sensitivity to Iranian Americans who are now, I would say, a kind of analogous community to Cubans, politically and structurally in a kind of similar position to Cuban Americans. So we must end this war and end as well the brutal sanctions regime imposed on Iran by the US. And in order to do so effectively, we should think carefully about our messaging and our language and our slogans so that Iranians can feel that they can be part of this mass movement and we can build as broad a coalition as possible to stop the war. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander and Nima, for grounding us in the history and in the stakes of this moment and what we should be doing. I want to draw everyone's attention to the letter tool that we have just put up in a QR code. We have also linked to it in the chat. Please write to your representatives. The Congress is going to be voting on a war powers resolution this week. It is critical that we send a message loud and clear, especially to those members of Congress that we are constituents of that have not yet committed to take a stance against this brutal war of aggression against Iran. Tonight, I'm happy to introduce members of New York City DSA's electoral slate that are running, among other things, on a platform against war, for peace, and for international solidarity. These are three incredible women that are all DSA members that perhaps need no introduction, since many of us are hard at work knocking doors and phone banking for them. We are honored to have first New York State Assembly member Claire Valdez. Claire currently represents Assembly District 36, and she is also running for the U.S. House of Representatives in Congressional District 7, which covers parts of Brooklyn and Queens. Claire, whenever you're ready, over to you.
Okay. Thank you all so much for being here and gathering together on short notice. Thanks to our speakers who are sharing incredibly necessary context. And this is a moment of real needed solidarity. So my name is Claire Valdez. I am running for New York 7 in New York City. And I want to start off by saying that liberation will never come from American bombs, and neither will democracy. The US has for decades waged wars with no justification against the global majority on behalf of the billionaire class. We see it in the sanctions around the world that only hurt regular working people. We see it in the embargo that is choking Cuba right now. We see it in the system that wages war so it can extract fossil fuels without limits, leaving the working class with a planetary crisis. We see it in the basically bipartisan support for the genocide in Gaza that continues to this day. And now we're staring down World War III after decades of invasions, failed regime changes, and deposing democratically elected leaders, all driven by the same underlying theme: serving the interests of the super rich. We're in the middle of an affordability crisis that neither party has been able or willing to deal with. Trump's
Recording in progress.
reckless foreign policy is only making it worse. Right now, hundreds of billions of our taxpayer dollars are being funneled to private contractors, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, to name just a few. These are the companies that stand to profit from this illegal war, while untold numbers of working class people will suffer. And we should make no mistake either. Working class people are already suffering. We're already suffering with inadequate healthcare, housing, childcare, food assistance. In New York City alone, there are over 100,000 homeless New Yorkers. Rather than investing in their futures, right now we are foreclosing the futures of working class Iranians in massive violence and bombardment. We need to end this illegal war. We need a foreign policy that respects international law, that leans into cooperation and away from violent escalation. We need to dramatically reduce our military budget and the apparatuses that support this destruction all over the world. We need to close US military bases around the world and invest in life here at home. We have to get out in the streets. We have to make our voices heard. Please write your Congress members if they have not already committed to voting for the War Powers Resolution and speaking out against this illegal war. and we have to continue to challenge the political status quo in the halls of power. And this really is the promise, in my opinion, of a democratic socialist world, that we, the working class, can determine collectively where our resources are being spent, that working class people can determine our future, and that we can organize together for a future without war. Solidarity forever. Thank you so much again for being here tonight and for taking action in this moment.
Thank you so much, Claire, for being with us. Again, I want to point to the letter tool. Please send a letter to your representatives. It is so important that we stop this while we still can. I would like to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Daria-Lisa Avila Chevalier. Daria-Lisa is running for the U.S. House of Representatives in New York's District 13, which covers parts of Upper Manhattan and the Bronx. Daria-Lisa, over to you whenever you're ready.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for organizing this on such short notice. My name is Daria-Lisa Avila Chevalier, as Jose said, and I am a Democratic Socialist running for Congress in New York 13 in Uptown in the Bronx. And like all of you, I'm here today because, like most Americans, horrified to watch this country drop bombs on Iran, violence that has already claimed the lives of hundreds of people, including so many children. This is happening at a time when our own communities, my own community, is suffering, and when we lack adequate housing, when cost of living is soaring, when a trip to the grocery store costs more and more each time. And I'm here because, as a socialist, I realize that this is a war fought for capital, for the profits of an insatiable war machine at the expense of everyone in Iran, in the broader Southwest Asia and North Africa region, in the working class communities here in the United States. And when our country goes to war, it is the working class communities of color who are fed into that war machine. We are all made less safe by this war that our taxes are funding. I'm running for Congress because our leadership has let us down. This war is no exception. Schumer and Jeffries fought for weeks against the War Powers Resolution that tried to prevent this very senseless attack. Schumer and Jeffries have both said that Trump needs to make his case to the American people about this new war, as though the problem were a procedural problem, as though it's okay to drop bombs on brown babies as long as you fill out the right paperwork. That it is not leadership. That is not leadership. That is cowardice, and it is complicity. And Americans have spoken very loudly and very clearly that we want no war with Iran. Congress needs to assert its authority to stop this illegal war. And I may be one of the younger folks running for Congress, but I am old enough to remember the war in Iraq. Give me 1 second, sorry. The war in Iraq, and how the Bush administration manufactured consent by peddling fictitious claims about weapons manufacturing. So how, as the Trump administration is doing now, they tried to argue that we could bomb for democracy or for freedom. And we know that was a lie that resulted in the deaths of over 1 million people, 1 million entire universes gone. A lie that has kept the American people fighting forever wars, a lie that has arguably gotten us into this new senseless one in Iran. And I'm reminded by the George Orwell quote, "The war is not meant to be won, it is meant to be continuous." But while they refuse to learn from history, we cannot afford to do the same. We must remember that the so-called war on terror justified the dramatic expansion of domestic surveillance operations, especially against Muslim communities here. It was in the name, and it was in that name that ICE was formed. And today we are witnessing a dramatic expansion of the very same enforcement apparatus, the widening of surveillance nets, the shrinking of all of our freedoms. And as the US bombs Iran, it is expanding its domestic surveillance operations. $30 million was just allocated for Palantir, for AI enforcement. $30 million of our money, the money of working class people, to corporations whose reason for being is our repression. And Trump boasts about having the biggest military budget in American history while cutting funding for food stamps and for Medicaid. This administration has spent trillions of US taxpayer dollars to kill other people's children, whether it is in this war in Iran or funding the genocide in Gaza. And not only is that expenditure morally reprehensible, it is money that isn't going towards affordable and dignified housing for Americans. It is money that isn't going towards high quality public schooling. It's money that isn't going towards universal childcare or for a Green New Deal or for Medicare for all. We want our money to go towards life and not death. And we want our investments to go into our babies, not bombs. So let me be unequivocal. I stand with the Iranian people and their right to choose their own futures. But as Iranian author Sahar Dajlani says, if your vision of liberation comes only through the destruction of innocent lives, then it is not freedom you're after. Because just like Iraq, this war will do nothing but destabilize the region and cause mass suffering to countless people. Another crisis that threatens global trade will lead to higher food and energy prices. Another war that will trigger retaliation and prevent any path towards lasting peace. These attacks serve to destabilize the region and embolden Israel to continue its genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza and to continue its aggressive actions in southern Lebanon. Netanyahu and Trump are cut from the same fascist, imperialist, warmongering cloth. I came to this political moment as an organizer, as someone who has spent much of her adult life combating American imperialism. And I've been organizing and advocating for Palestinian human rights and advocating for divestment from Israel's apartheid since I was quite young. I spent a summer in Palestine and I saw firsthand the violence that Palestinians are subjected to daily. And that summer was the same summer that Michael Brown was killed, and the summer that I began to see even more deeply the connection between the ways in which our tax dollars are mobilized to repress communities abroad and how surveillance and police violence plays out right here at home. It led me to organizing on campus, to organizing with BYP 100, to Families for Freedom, and many other organizations that were fighting back against the state-sanctioned violence that was inherent to these systems of detention, of incarceration here in the US, alongside with the organizing I was doing on Columbia's campus, both before and during the encampments. And I've known for a very long time that we cannot separate the war machine from the injustices that we experience here at home. And as the US begins another senseless war, I'm committed to fighting that too. I'm running for Congress because I believe that it's our Democratic leaders like Schumer and Jeffries and Espaillat who have failed us and have brought us to this moment of having to fight against rising fascism. And because I believe that our children deserve to live in a world that isn't governed by the whims of oligarchs like Donald Trump, intent on the destruction of all of our communities. So, I am very proud to be among all of you as a democratic socialist, but also all of you who are fighting for the same vision. And I'm so grateful to DSA for your leadership and your moral clarity in this moment, to all of you who are looking for ways to support and make sure that we are pushing back on this war machine. So if you haven't already, please use the Action Network link to email your representatives now. And again, thank you all so much for really having the moral clarity and the will to take action in this moment.
Thank you so much, Daria Lisa. I do need to interrupt with an important announcement so everyone is aware. We have been made aware that this call is being streamed without our permission. We want to keep everybody safe. We encourage everybody to turn off your cameras and change your username if you feel you need to. We are not ashamed of anything we're saying because we know what we stand for. We stand for peace. We stand for justice. We stand for solidarity with the working class, no matter where they are. And we're aware that our enemies are constantly trying to infiltrate and bring us down and manipulate our words in order to disorganize us. We know that we are the many and we will win. We want to make sure everybody on this call is safe. Do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe. I do want to let everybody know that, as you know, Daria Lisa and Claire are both running for Congress. Congressional runs do not have matching funds. It is very important that we send both of our champions to Congress to fight back against the war machine and win the vision of peace and solidarity that brings all of us to this work. In addition, we are fundraising for our next speaker, who is running for State Senate District 12 in Queens, Abir Kawes. You can also donate to her at this link. But for now, I would love to pass the mic over to Abir. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Huda. Salam, peace, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Like Huda said, my name is Abir Kouas. I'm running for State Senate in District 12, representing Western Queens. And I first want to start with the question, why should a candidate for State Senate be on a call talking about war? We're meant to believe that these things are not connected, that the local is not connected to the global. Actually, the last time that I was on this mass call, it was just a little bit over a month ago, and we were talking about our comrades, Alex Preddy and Renee Good, who were killed by ICE and the movement that was happening in Minnesota. And I spoke about my father's own detention by ICE in the early 2000s, his incarceration for 3 years by ICE, and then being deported. And I want to connect that to what's happening today because my father came to the United States in the early 90s and my mother came with him. And the reason that they didn't go back home was because the Gulf War was happening at the time and their families told them, do not return, it's not safe here. After that, they faced decades of surveillance and eventual incarceration, deportation. In 2008, my dad was deported to Jordan. Now, my dad, who cannot come back to the United States, who's been separated from his family, is living in a war zone. This morning, I got a call from my family, and we were planning, what do we do about, my father? What do we do if missiles start hitting Jordan? And missiles have already been intercepted and hit communities in Amman, where he is staying in the capital of Jordan. And right now, the Middle East is literally continually in a war zone. And so you see how the wars abroad are directly connected to the immigrants and the working class communities that we are fighting for each day. It's a cycle that is repeated. And when we are talking about the fight to abolish ICE, when we are talking about the fight for affordability, we have to talk about the conditions that bring immigrants here, the conditions that they are fleeing. We have to also talk about this administration that so many elected officials will speak out against an administration and they will say something like abolish ICE, but they will not say something like I am against the war or free Palestine. And we have to speak out about how we don't have a politics of consistency because the administration that is making lives difficult for immigrant communities, that is making lives difficult for people of color, for working class communities, that is gutting their resources and telling them that these communities, poor and immigrant and working class communities, are stealing resources. They are actually spending our resources to fund a war machine. And so we as democratic socialists, whether we are in Congress, whether we are in our state legislature, whether we are in our city legislature, whether we are a district representative, whether we are on our school board, it's our role to speak out against all atrocities. It's our role to fight against all destructive policies, whether they are happening to the street vendors and the local streets of Queens and the local streets of Astoria and Jackson Heights and Woodside and Sunnyside, or whether they are happening abroad. And that is a politics of consistency. And we know that that is a politics that so many people are interested in. Now, I'm part of a movement that was struggled with DSA, that was forged with DSA to bring this politics of consistency to the state legislature. I was part of developing the Not on Our Dime bill with then Assembly Person Zohran Mamdani, and that was also co-sponsored by Senator Jabari Brisport, who's one of our socialists in office. And we brought that bill to state. We told our state legislators that we wanted to divest from the war machine at our local level. It's the same ask where we don't want the pensions and the bonds that are the bonds are invested for pensions for our public school teachers to be invested in war. And we don't want a flow of money going from New York State that is untaxed, raised by charities to go to send settlers to steal Palestinian land. And we brought that to the state legislature. And until this day, we only have a handful of names signed on to that bill. And I will proudly say that most of those names, the majority of those names, are Democratic Socialist candidates who are in our Democratic Socialist electeds in office. And they are representing the hundreds, the thousands, and the millions of us who are hitting the streets each day. In fact, they are representing the will of their own constituents. Local elected officials should be representing the calls of their constituents. And it's not fringe for the working class or young people to be saying that they are anti-war and to be saying that they are also invested in a fight for affordability. We also saw that with the victory of Zahran Mamdani as mayor. We saw that people in the thousands were able to connect the threat of affordability, the threat that they are facing each day, to the billionaire class, and that they were voting for a politics of consistency. In fact, the attacks of Zahran trying to say that he was somebody who was too focused and trying to attack him with asking him about Israel, we actually saw that when he actually focused on New York, the affordability crisis in New York, that people saw that as a politics of consistency, and they voted and they supported him. So this is the movement that we are part of. I'm proud to be part of a movement that in 2002, the elected official who brought so many of us into the DSA, so many of us into this movement, Bernie Sanders, who was one of the only senators, congressional senators, to vote against the war in Iraq. And we're part of that lineage, and we're part of pushing that forward because we know that we need to fight for justice on every level. We need to change the status quo, which has allowed war and genocide to be perpetuated by the country that we live in, to be perpetuated by the taxes that we pay. So I'm really proud to say that I'm a democratic socialist. I'm really proud to say that I'm running as a democratic socialist. And I really believe that we are reflecting the will of the constituents and the masses on the ground. So I call you all to support our movement, to join our movement, because we are a movement of moral clarity and political consistency. Thank you all.
Thank you, Abir. I am going to pass it over next to Gustavo, our co-chair.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be here. What an amazing speech from our three candidates tonight. Abir killing it as usual. I'm always inspired to hear our Democratic Socialist slate respond to the moment. I want to re-up our ask to donate to the slate. As Grace mentioned earlier today, we know that the Democrats are not fighting this war. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer just spent the last several weeks fighting for a war powers resolution not to reach the floor of Congress. They have been fighting every member of Congress who has tried to resist Trump, who has tried to be an obstacle to the Trump agenda. They don't have the basic decency and bravery to say that what is happening in Iran is wrong. They are the kinds of politicians who feel we need to poll test the message. We need to consult with the weapons manufacturers before we put forward our position. And that's why we run Democratic Socialists. Who do you want to see on the news representing the working class fighting back? Do you want to see people like Abir, who has lived this struggle her entire life, who introduced some of the strongest anti-Zionist legislation in the New York legislature? Do you want to see people like Claire? Claire Valdez is the only candidate in her race who is willing to call out Democratic leadership for failing to fight the Trump agenda and for failing to fight the war in Iran. And Daria Lisa, of course, emerged from the Palestine movement, from campus organizing and the occupation of Columbia University to fight against the Zionist project. So electoral work is one of our most powerful tools. It is not the only tool, and we are not trying to profit off of an atrocity abroad. Rather, we are trying to pool together our collective resources as the working class to build a movement here that can actually fight against anti-imperialism and win and replace it with a socialist agenda and a socialist politics. So if you have not yet donated, please click on the link that's being dropped in the chat, pull out your phone, scan this QR code. Your donation will be split evenly 3 ways among our 3 candidates. And if you have donated to them, please drop an emoji in the chat and show that we're building solidarity among the working class to build an anti-imperialist project.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. Please donate to the slate. Please write to your reps. We will continue to share those links in the chat and on the screen. But I would like to hand the mic over to our last speaker of the evening, Ethan, who is a New York City DSA member and who will speak about the Break the Chain campaign. Ethan, after you.
Salam, comrades. I'm Ethan. I'm an Iranian DSA member and an organizer with Break the Chain. As we firmly reject the horrifying escalation of the US and Israel's ongoing airstrikes on civilian targets in Iran, destroying children's schools, heritage sites, and houses of worship, accompanied by Trump's proposal for US boots on the ground, it must be reiterated that this is not just a conflict over there. The aggression originates here. The war economy is not an abstraction. While US and Israeli strikes continue to kill hundreds across Iran, the material for that destruction is processed through this city. It is loaded into the cargo hold of civilian aircraft at JFK Airport. It is crafted in the workshops of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which could be building new subway infrastructure or medical equipment, but is instead machining components for the munitions dropping on Tehran. The city's unparalleled productive capacity is leveraged for US and Israeli arms shipments to fuel an assault that has already killed at least 555 of our people in Iran, according to the Iranian Red Crescent Society. Among the dead are over 100 young children killed in a single strike on a girls' school in Minab. The cost of this trade is visible in the city's own skyline and crumbling infrastructure. And while schools and services in the 5 boroughs suffer, war is waged on Iran not for the liberation of the Iranian people, but in service of US imperial interests. From the personnel uniforms designed by Cry Precision to the explosives shipped on commercial flights from JFK, we know that it is the same weapons manufacturers and defense contractors that benefit from every imperialist aggression on Palestine, on Iran, and in the mass abductions of our immigrant neighbors at the hands of ICE throughout the 5 boroughs. As socialists, we know that it is our duty to fight the moral failures of imperialist war, both at home and abroad. We must be vocal in leading the charge against debilitating sanctions, starving the Iranian people, against Trump's blatant attempts to undermine peace negotiations, and mobilize in the streets to disrupt the war machine. But we must also organize in our own workplaces and in our own communities. Every New Yorker who flies in and out of JFK, every parent, every student, every worker, deserves the peace of mind that their safety as passengers is the absolute priority of the airport, not shipping weapons and explosives in the cargo holds of civilian aircraft so that the US and Israeli governments can continue bombing Iran. It is only through a mass organized movement bringing the fight to the war machine back home with deep community mobilization and workplace organizing that we can halt this war in its tracks and break the link in the chain that runs from the shops of Brooklyn to the girls' schools of Minab, where over 100 children now lie dead. The current assault reveals the truth. The pallet offloaded at JFK and the drone component machined in the Navy Yard are direct material links in the US-Israeli chain of aggression. By uniting these fights, a just transition for the workers here, and an immediate arms embargo abroad, this movement, capable of severing that chain at its key logistical points, can be built. That's why we're inviting you to join Break the Chain, which is New York City DSA and to our working group's campaign for a people's embargo. If you're organized in a union, you can use our template resolution to demand your local stand up against war in Iran, which we will be sharing. And even if you aren't, we still need you in the streets with us. So we would really encourage you to fill out the Break the Chain onboarding form by visiting the link that we'll be sharing and join us at our next general body meeting in April. And we hope to see you all there.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Please scan the QR code to join Break the Chain. We are getting ready to close out for the evening. We want to impress on everyone how important it is that we all came together tonight on such short notice, and that it's important to keep the pressure up. We cannot let this criminal war continue. Please get involved. Please use the letter tool to send a letter to your representatives. Please donate to our slate. We have 9 people that are running across congressional and state seats this year, and it is very important that we send every one of our 9 comrades that are running. to Albany or to Washington in order to win the democratic socialist agenda that all people deserve. We have a world to win for the working class, and it starts with all of us. So please use the letter tool, please donate, and if you haven't already, join DSA. We are the political home for all of you. If you stand for workers' rights, if you stand against war and imperialism, if you stand for a better world that all working class people deserve, this is your home. We are waiting for you to join. And until next time, we'll see you in the streets. Have a good night, everyone.
Recording.